Hi everybody, it's Tom Woods. I'm here with Professor Jeff Herbener of Grove City College, and we're talking today about GDP. Is this a misleading figure? Is it the appropriate figure to be using? Is there any merit in it? Is there anything that might be better than GDP? We're going to take sort of an Austrian look at GDP. So let's start, Jeff, with just explaining what GDP is. What's the definition?
Right, GDP is the dollar value of all the final goods produced in the economy. So it includes all consumer goods that the consumers buy. It includes all the capital capacity that businessmen buy, the so-called investment expenditures, and then all of the government expenditures on goods and services.
Okay, now is there anything wrong with GDP? Does it give us a misleading picture, and if so, how?
Well, there's nothing wrong per se with it. All aggregate measures have some drawbacks and have to be understood with some grain of salt. You can't explain everything with these things. But it's a useful statistic for telling us the extent to which we have a production of final goods. And one of the main problems with it is trying to ascertain how much of changes in GDP are based just on the prices of goods and how much on the production, the amount of goods that have been produced. So that tends to be the real problem with it.
But isn't there some way of correcting for price changes to make sure that...
Yeah, but there's no perfect way to do this. We can construct all sorts of different price indices and do the adjustment, and we would get different answers, obviously, depending on what goods we put into the market basket that we use to calculate the price index.
No, but isn't the fact that government expenditures are just lumped into
Right.
GDP, isn't that a source of difficulties for people
Right.
conceptually to understand, for example, how well an economy is doing, when there might be good reason to think that government expenditures are not actually a net plus to consumer welfare, right?
Yeah, that's right. So if we take GDP to refer to standard of living, which is what we tend to do, well, then we start to get big problems, right? And the biggest problem is, as you say, we lump together private expenditures that have obviously satisfied our preferences, as indicated by our voluntary purchases, with government expenditures that, of course, were totally disconnected from our preferences, and even the expenditures are totally disconnected from the voluntary nature of the exchange. And so even if government officials want these things that they're buying, the dollar amounts that they pay are all inflated and not market determined, and so that's correct. So what we need to do to get some better indication of standards of living is net out government expenditures, and then we would just have private goods produced for the private parties who are voluntarily purchasing these things. And there's been some work done on this, so it is useful as long as we realize, what meaning we're attaching to it, and how we should adjust it to capture that meaning.
Now, what did Murray Rothbard do with this? He came up with the concept of private product remaining, which he thought was superior.
Right.
What is that all about? How do you arrive? What is private product remaining? How do you arrive at it?
Yeah, well, basically this is what you do. So we add up all GDP and we net out the government expenditures, and this gives us private product remaining. But fundamentally, now we can do this in different ways, but that's the basic calculation.
Now, why? This may seem like an easy question, but why do you net out the government spending? I mean, after all, spending is spending, right? It puts people to work. It puts money in people's pockets. Like, why would you think that government spending would be a minus or would not be a net addition to human welfare?
Well, it's that we can't tell, because the only way we can tell whether something is a net addition to human welfare is through voluntary purchase. And so if the government raises taxes from the rest of it and then just spends the money that they raise in this fashion, then we're not really sure.
Right, because we didn't consent to the spending,
Exactly.
and we didn't make the decision what to spend it on, how much to spend.
Right.
There's no way to know that we actually wanted the thing.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, right. And sending out questionnaires doesn't
help us,
that,
because
right.
what we're trying to do is calculate this by money demand, by our demands as we express our preferences in the market. And so we have things that are just incomparable, right? We can't add apples and oranges. We can't really add these things together.
Right. Is there anything else we need to cover?
Oh, well, the other big thing with GDP is another fallacy that's related to it, where we have to be very careful about the meaning, is that GDP only indicates to us at best final goods produced. It's not a measure of all economic production. And a lot of journalists especially are prone to this. They think that GDP is the economy. But if you just think quickly about the production of any particular consumer good, you can see that many other things have to be produced in order for the consumer good itself to be produced.
None of that's captured.
None of that is included. So you produce an automobile, but you have to produce the steel, you have to produce the iron to produce the steel, and so on and so forth. And none of those intermediate goods are included in GDP. So this gives us a very misleading picture of the nature of overall production in the economy.
Right. And now, how exactly is it misleading? What is the major false view that people draw when they look at GDP? It's consumption, right? Consumption is 70% of the economy. But what about all the gross saving that's necessary to carry on all these different stages of production? That's just out. Because wouldn't that be double counting? Is that why they leave that out?
Well, it's double counting if your intention is to find out the value of all the final goods, and it's double counting.
Yeah, right. But if you want to know how the whole economy works,
then you have to include it.
Yeah. And
if you do this, it sort of flip-flops the figures. It's hard to estimate this. Nobody actually does the statistics, so we don't really know for sure. But if consumption is 70% of GDP and investment is maybe, say, 15%, if you add in gross investment, as you suggest, all the production of the intermediate goods, this would radically alter that proportion.
Well, just to help people put some flesh on these bones, can you just give us an example of a product and give us a sense of what some of the stages that are involved in producing that product that would not be captured in GDP?
Yeah. So let's say it's a house. You want to make a house, and so you get the final sale value of the house. The customer buys the house. And the price of the house would be included in GDP. But of course, the first step would be extracting raw materials out of nature from which you make the products to produce the house. So you have to have lumberjacks. They have to cut down trees in the forest. So that production's not included. You have to have sawmills that mill the lumber for the thing. You have to have trucking, which transports the lumber to places where it can be worked on some more, and so on. Right? Cement, it's the same thing. You have to extract the raw materials and then proceed to a cement plant and then make the cement, and then you have to ship it someplace and form it into blocks, and then eventually ship these to the building site. So all those different processes, and you can imagine there are hundreds of them, maybe even thousands of different intermediate production processes. And as you said before, each one has value that gets sort of double and triple counted and quadruple counted right, when you add all this up. And so you have, who knows what the multiple is, but it's a fairly large, sizable multiple of all this, and it all has to come from businessmen, from entrepreneurs making investment expenditures.
Right, but meanwhile, people are told or are under the impression that what we need is more consumer spending, spend. But if we followed that advice to a T, and everybody, as soon as he got money, he just spent it on another consumer good. So you buy a pack of gum at my store, I take that money and I buy, well, I don't know, let's say you bought like 10 gallons of milk from me, and I take that money and I buy a shirt, and the shirt guy buys a hat, and the hat guy buys a gallon of gas, and the gas guy, then no wages get paid, none of this, all the production structure we just described grinds to a complete halt.
That's exactly it.
But that would be nirvana, because you'd have all the consumption you want.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think, is that enough fallacies to deal with for one video?
That's pretty good. Yeah.
All right, we're going to stop right there. All right, Professor Herbner teaches economics at libertyclassroom.com, so that's where all the cool people are learning economics. But also, if you want to learn more about what we were just talking about right now, head over to libertyclassroom.com/GDP, where I'll have a page with resources. And of course, learnaustrianeconomics.com. Professor Herbner, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Tom.